Welcome, everyone, and happy DEBcember. You heard it right. It is DEBcember, and we are going to talk about how to start 2023. Now, this is my third annual start in DEBcember. This started in 2020 because we couldn't get rid of 2020 fast enough. And I'm excited to have such wonderful guests for my third annual Let's Kick Off the Year Early show. I just realized I've called this show like 3 different things, but that's okay. I'm Deb. If you know me, you are completely following this. If you're not following this, you'll catch up, I'm sure. For those who don't know me, I'm Deborah Eckerling. I'm author of Your Goal Guide, a roadmap for setting, planning, and achieving your goals, and creator of the Deb Method for Goal Setting Simplified. And I specialize in team building workshops and event outcome optimization. You can't get what you want by yourself. You need your friends, you need your peers, you need to constantly be in that mode of education, information, and people. And every Monday, I bring in 3 friends to dive into the topic of the week. And boy, do I have great friends today. Cherian, who's a co-founder of Gatherly, who I just met this year. This is funny. I've got a friend I met this year, last year, and the year before. So I was going to say decades because each year feels like a decade, but I love that I've met so many wonderful people over the last 3 years. So Chris is here. Also, Annie P. Ruggles, the Dean of the Non-Sleazy Sales Academy. So excited to have you here, Annie. And Keith Spiro, Mr. Communicast himself, who remembers the very first, actually, you've been on all 3, start 2020, whatever now, shows. So welcome. Very excited to have you all. I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves because, as usual, I have said nothing. Chris, welcome. Please tell everybody who you are, why you're here, and so excited to get on with it into the new year.
Well, thanks so much, Deb. I'm Chris, one of the co-founders and CEO of Gatherly. We help make your virtual events way more engaging. Think of it like a birthday party that you walk into online. You don't want to have one person talk and everybody listen. You'd rather be able to get to meet some people. So much of that, we help facilitate trade shows, conferences, poster fairs, you name it. And we help make event hosts' lives a lot easier. For me, excited to be on the show today to talk a little bit, like you said, about some of the challenges from last year, this year, I guess, some of the challenges from this year, some of the successes, and how we can pull that over into next year.
Awesome. And we were talking before the show that we never really catch up unless I'm interviewing you. So I think that should be a goal, is to have a conversation with people not watching us, this year, next year, whatever. I'm really excited that we met this year and that you're here to celebrate the new year with us. And Annie, welcome.
Thanks, Deb.
And everybody, I always love to tell the story about how we met. We were at a networking event together, but we didn't meet. But you saw in the chat that I introduced myself as Deb from the Deb Method. And You said,
I need to know anybody who's going to advocate for themselves so hard they name their method after themselves. Like, I need to be friends with that person. Yes.
And you were right.
And I was 1,000,000,000% right. And here we are. And you just developmental edited my new book. So hi, y'all. I'm Annie P. Ruggles. I am a Deb Eckerling super fan. I am also the founder of the Non-Sleazy Sales Academy and the host of the podcast, Too Legitimate to Quit, trying to bring some less stuffy material into the B2B space so we can bust through stigmas and get people selling as their wonderful selves, not as the horrible ways they may or may not have been taught to sell.
Well, I'm excited because I think sales as a goal is something everybody, if they're not having it as a goal, they're not really telling. If they're an entrepreneur or a consultant or whatever, sales needs to be a goal because you have no sales, you have no business.
Correct.
So
I sounded like I was being interviewed on the stand, like, Ms. Ruggles, do you agree that if you do not sell? Yes, Your Honor, I do concur.
Awesome. So we will dive more into that. And Keith Spiro, lovely to see you.
Keith Spiro here, Communicast and business strategist, community builder. What does that mean, right? But I've spent 3 years now. This is the 3rd time I'm coming onto your show. I love the fact that DEBcember gives us an extra month to make the next year really fly.
Well, and that's really the point, right? When you get a running start into anything, you are more likely to set yourself up for success.
Absolutely. And I'm a big fan of the Deb method. Another super fan just for you.
Awesome. I love it. I feel like it's like the Deb fan club show. But of course, I am a fan of you all, which is why you are here celebrating with me. So, we've touched upon this a little bit, but so Chris, tell me, why are you so excited to get a jump on the new year?
Man, this is a good question. And it's something that I'm still working through, to be frank. So I'll give you like the abridged notes right now. I think there's a lot of upcoming changes let's start with the new year by focusing on this year. I think there's a lot of changes that our business had to go through this year, a lot of adjustments that were planned and completely unplanned. And I'm sure that's not a surprise to anybody. And I think we've taken a lot of learnings from what we've done this year. And I'm really excited for not quite a blank slate, but call it a new slate, to go ahead and just apply everything that we've screwed up and everything that we've done well and take it to a completely new like customer base, investors, whoever it might be, and start, like a fresh train there, right? Even if it's not necessarily so fresh.
Awesome. And we've got some other super fans here. I need to do a shout out to our friend John Chen, another new friend this year. John is the master of engaging virtual meetings, and like so many other awesome people I've met this year, it's one of those, how have we not met before? We met over the summer. And Ryan Swantram, I want to give you a shout out because he said it's DEBcember, let's go. Love the enthusiasm. And we've got George Finkelman as well, giving us smile emojis, emoji smiles. So can't get enough of that. I'm thrilled that you're also enthusiastic and excited about starting the new year. Annie, tell me, why are you excited to get rolling into 2023?
Because 2022, like all years, was a roller coaster of really awesome stuff and not so great stuff. Like Chris said, there was a lot of learnings this year. And Chris, I love the way that you said in both your planned and your unplanned. I think this year I allowed more unplanned, which in itself was an unlearning for me, to stop being so rigid in my over management of myself and to sort of just allow me to create again. And that wasn't without challenge. It was a hard mindset year, but a great output year. And because I took some big leaps, I am more excited than ever to put out what I'm putting out into the world. So I'm excited for DEBcember to usher in a not clean slate, but a new level.
I love that you changed that it is the new level, because we want to keep leveling up, because if we're not, what is the point?
Right. And I don't regret the missteps I made last year. I regret not brushing my hair before some live streams that I was on that I didn't know would be on video. Like, sure, I regret those things. But everything else I did with the best of intentions and as solid a strategy as I could muster at the time. So I don't want to blank slate it, because then I don't carry any of my hard-earned mistakes with me. And there's way more potential for me to reinvent the wheel. And similarly, to forget my own tenacity, right? Like, this was a really ick mindset year for me for a lot of this year. And I got myself through that with the help of loving and supportive friends and clients like you, Deb. And I don't want to discount that at all, but I need those learnings too. I need the soft skills too. I need to remember who got me through this year. Me.
Absolutely. Where those gold stars, those ever important, because and whether you're listening to this as the Deb Show or you're watching us live or the replay, you get a gold star because you made it. You're here. And woohoo. Enthusiasm, enthusiasm, enthusiasm. So Keith, tell us again, why are you so thrilled to be celebrating this turn of year again early?
Well, it's also a lot of what Chris and Annie said. I would use the word noise. This past year, a lot of noise all around us, change, confusion. It started with the pandemic, or we rolled beyond that. But why I'm excited is because we're at the tipping point. And this is an opportunity for a much better year coming up. Take those learnings that we've had, look at what's worked well, move that a step, drop the things that didn't work. So I really see us at a tipping point, and having an extra 30 days to test before we actually call it New Year's is kind of a nice jump start.
And for all those purists who believe the year actually starts in January, don't worry, I've got you covered. I actually start the year twice. So in DEBcember, we talk about things like vision and mission. And then in January, we're going to talk specifically about professional goals, personal goals, and speaking goals. So those are the 3 topics beyond the kickoff parties at the beginning of each month. So we've said we've had to make a lot of lemonade this year. So what do you think was your biggest challenge this past year, Keith?
My biggest challenge was staying true to, I always use 3 words to guide me. The one that worked best was fluid, because there was a lot of change and it was a way to get around it. But the challenges came from really trying to transform things and not just do things the way they were. And I don't control much. And what we find is you've got to go with the flow sometimes, or you've got to deal with things as they happen. And so that was, to me, my single biggest challenge was staying on top of the things where I could truly see transformation.
And remind me, what were those 3 words?
So they were transform, they were fluid, and they were scribe. Scribe was to keep track of what was happening. And also because of the journalism that I brought to bear, moving from content and media and kind of blurring the line between the 2.
Got it. So like everybody, some successful, some less successful. Did you pick your 3 words for next year yet? I mean, for this year, sorry, forgive me.
You're asking me that question?
Yes. Do you
Okay.
have your...
Because Annie was raising her hand, so I was going to defer immediately. But no, the answer is I've got it down to 4. I'm kind of thinking about it. And I was hoping tonight we could figure out the best of the ones that I'm questioning.
Well, no better time than now. What
All
are
right,
those 4 words? And we'll get you down to 3.
Sure. So it's learn, share, delight, and magical.
Okay, so I have an opinion, but Annie or Chris, do you want to say something first?
Team Delight. 1 vote Delight. Hardcore.
I'll back up the delight vote. Right. I mean, it's like the work to live or live to work, right? And I would hope you're working to live. So delight.
Well, he gets 3. Is that correct, Keith? And
That is correct.
You're trying. And this is my thought. I love delight as well. And I think delight and magical, they're similar and different, right? So I would say do delight magical and come up with a completely different 3rd word.
Exactly. And that's, so delight I added about a half hour ago, because magical has worked because it's the thing that transforms, and it's trying to be active each year. So I said, oh, I've got this one. I've got magical. I've got learn, share. Learn, share. Yeah, we do that all the time. It makes a lot of sense. But when delight popped into my head a little while ago, and particularly thinking in terms of clients, right? I do a lot of consulting. I do a lot of business strategy and contributor advisory types of roles. If I can delight a client, if I can help them do something magical, that's a win. That's one of the biggest wins I could look for in 2023. So I'm going to take those 2 and look for January 1st at 12:01 a.m. and we'll figure out what the 3rd one is.
Okay, then. So Chris and Annie, do you do the 3 words for the year thing?
So I don't mean to flex here, Deb, but I do 1 word. I'll clarify. I shouldn't say 1 word. I should say 1 theme, right? And this actually comes from Charles, who has been on your show before, right? An old college friend of mine. He sent over a video about theme years, right? And the principle of the video was saying, like, look, like, I, like many others, used to keep this very long laundry list of New Year's goals that would be lost somewhere in a desk drawer by January 14th or 15th, right? So Charles introduced this concept, old college friend of mine, he introduced this concept of theme years where you say, okay, this year I'm going to focus on health, knowledge, discipline, whatever it might be, right? If, in case Charles is coming onto your show later, I'm going to do a little bit of a spoiler for him. I think his word this year is independent, or upcoming year will be independence. We were actually talking about this 2 nights ago. So I've been deciding on mine. I'm between discipline and the correct grammar form of like being adaptive, right? So those are the 2 ones that I'm debating. Flexibility, I guess, right? Like one close to flexibility. So those are the 2 that I'm debating between right now. Leaning a little bit towards discipline, but hopefully that gives a little bit of color on what I'm thinking.
So for last year, wasn't it learn?
For me, I think last year was learn for me, right?
I'm just like, am I remembering this, or did you just send it to me in my head?
No,
I
I was actually kind of surprised. I don't think we talked about this. You just guessed it correctly.
Wow. And so how did last year learn work for you?
It worked very well, but by no means of my own. I think I learned the most from my unplanned, what I was talking about earlier, right? I had a lot of like, I think good opportunities to learn intentionally, right? Like my girlfriend and I started a book club where we've been trading like book recommendations and things like that. Like there's like small like activities like that I think were very intentional about learning. On the other hand, the biggest learnings that I've had were when I was knocked on my butt 20 times this year from something that was like coming from like 2 blocks away and I had no idea it was coming, right? So very successful. Whether or not I had a say in that, I don't know, but we can keep that one aside.
Excellent. So your biggest challenge from the last year was just getting up, or getting up from being knocked on your tushy probably isn't a challenge for you, because as an entrepreneur, as a change maker, if you don't try, if you don't fail, you don't win, right?
Yeah, I think it's like stick to itness, right? Or like resiliency is like the one thing that I was like, I had to keep going back to that well, like that personal well this year. And in reflection, I'm very proud of how that turned out. No, again, I wouldn't give myself the credit. I would give it to like my support network of, like friends, family, mentors, like that circle is like what really keeps me chugging along through like all the nonsense that can happen in a given year.
Got it. But you're here and you're excited, and we get a brand new year, either that started a few days ago or that starts in a month, depending on your calendar. So Annie, you want to start with your words, or you want to start with your biggest challenge from last year, since we're all over the place, but it's a party.
It is a party. It's, so some year I have had words, and some years I have not had words. And this year, because I've been running a pop culture small business podcast for 2 years, very not surprisingly, I had a pop culture quote as my like fixture lighthouse of the year, which was from The West Wing, and it was "Let Bartlett be Bartlett." So for anybody out there who has seen The West Wing, it's the theory of like when you try to rein in President Josiah Bartlett, excuse me, it does not go well, because in order for him to connect, he really needs to be in his own essence. And that sort of came through in all my work this year, where I was being very much me, fully in my very controlled bubbles and with my clients, so they would get like the full Annie experience. But then my copy or my content would be just a little bit more safe, right? And so I was like, well, what would happen if I let Bartlett be Bartlett? Now, as of DEBcember 5th, I have not elected a phrase or beacon of next year. I am taking consideration. I'm taking nominations on that.
I have a nomination.
Salespirational, the word that Deb
yes,
invented.
that was my nomination.
Yes, there we go. Deb has invented the word for me, salespirational, and it may very much become the word of this year. Yes. And honestly, my biggest challenge this year was optimism, which is interesting for a human who self-identifies as a Muppet. right? In terms of the fact that I tend to be pretty sunny side, but how I feel about people and my belief in other people and how I feel about my ability to serve people doesn't always translate when you're playing the long game. And relationship selling can be a long game. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. And that reflects in my own business, right? Or building this novella from idea to fruition took many, many pivots. And in each of those pivots, even though, again, I was beautifully supported, there's a risk there. And I'm a professional strategist. I've been a professional strategist for more than a decade. My clients pay me to help them avoid costly mistakes. That's challenging, though, because you see landmines everywhere where they aren't necessarily. And so what would happen is I would kneecap myself. And this wasn't just this year. This was creeping on over many years now that I've diagnosed the problem, right? But I'd get excited about something. And then almost instantaneously, my strategy brain would kick in and tell me why not to do it. And I made safer choices because of that. And I think my business suffered because of that. Until I latched on to let Bartlett be Bartlett and was like, listen, you got to make these decisions anyway. You're either going to be optimistic and just do the dang thing, or you can keep foreboding joy, hedging your bets, whatever you want to call it. But that's what I definitely struggled with throughout this year, but more so at the beginning of the year.
Well, I think you're doing awesome. And I think it's the perfect time to tell people about your book.
Okay.
I'm sorry, your salespirational creative nonfiction novella.
God, that's just so long. Yes. So it is called The Coach Who Would Not Sell. It is a noir-inspired strategy novella and companion guide. As Deb put it so beautifully in our pre-chat, I stand in the shoes of a woman who did one step further than I have so many times, right on the cusp of old yellering my business, but never quite pulling the trigger. But I asked myself, what would it feel like to actually kill my business? And what could I do to bring myself back from that brink? And so that is how The Coach Who Would Not Sell came, with like Deb popping in and out of it, making it better 57 times between points A and B. It started as a romance novel. It ended as a noir, the unplanned, Chris, the unplanned.
Well, and the thing that you're missing from the description is, and you can go to sellcoachsell.com.
Oh, yes.
And put in Deb sent me.
Yes. Oh, it's underneath me. Yes.
Yes.
Go to Deb Coach Sell. No, Deb Coach Sell. No, Sell Coach. Go to sellcoachsell.com and use the code Deb sent me. I'm so excited about promoting my novella. I forget how to speak.
The other part that I wanted to add to is, so it's the challenges of this coach who killed this fictional, air quotes for those who are listening, coach. And then you set the coach straight with tips and advice and practical exercises to get them out of their head and away from stranger danger.
Basically, yes. And Coach Fatales.
Yes. Thank you for the sound effects. Well, we've talked about the challenges for the year, so let's talk about the joys. Is that your joy, Annie, or do you have something else?
My joy is definitely how much I've created this year. I didn't know, anybody who's a podcaster, I did not know that Spotify does a Wrapped for podcasters, but they do. And it tallied up how many minutes and how many countries and how much more I put out than the average business podcast and all of these things. And I just sat there and went, dang, I made a lot this year. And I was really lucky back when I was in my musical theater heyday. I was in a wonderful show called Fanatical that I was in several workshop productions of. And there was a song written for my voice, and I'm so proud of it, called Look What I Made. And really, that's just it. It's just, hey, look what I made. And so for me, that joy is not only over 100 interviews of TLTQ, but now also this novella that is so something only I could create. that I look at my body of work now and I just can't imagine my life without those 2 projects. And one of them is only a week old and the other one turns 2 on Wednesday. So, hey, look what I made. That was just such a joy over and over and over this year.
Amazing. And they're both Sagittariuses.
Oh, they are. Isn't that special? I think that's because I always wanted to be a Christmas baby. But, you know, I'm a Gemini, so good luck.
So Chris, what was your big joy from this year?
Yeah, I think this is something I was reflecting on pretty recently, actually, with another friend, close friend of Charles as well. His name is Safraz. He actually might be listening today, so shout out to him if he's around. But what we were talking about recently was this idea of starting to advocate. He's around. Starting to advocate for what you want, right? And I think, like, I'll give you the example. So I'm a startup founder, and I'm pulled in 100 different directions by 100 different people daily, right? It's always a customer, investor, employee, like, you know, like strategic partnership. Somebody wants something. And I always hear people say, like, oh yeah, I'd love to start my own business so I can, like, be my own boss. I'm sure everybody in this room can agree. Nothing is further from the truth, because you are now, like, working for everybody, right? Like, everybody becomes your boss, you know? So I think there's like over the last 2 years, there's been this incredible pressure. Like, how do I please this person? How do I acquiesce to their demands? How do I make this work at my personal cost? Which is something that's very important in leadership, being able to sacrifice when it's right. But it's very easy to stop setting boundaries, go over that line. And this is something Safraz and I were talking about, right? Being able to stop for a second and say, what is best for me? And that doesn't have to be a selfish activity. It can be, but if you temper it and make sure you spend the time thinking about yourself and how that affects others, as well as thinking about others and how that affects you, you can maximize whether it's like shareholder value, utility, personal joy and happiness, like whatever you're maximizing for, you should definitely bring yourself into the equation. So again, something that I've only really been reflecting on recently, but I think I've done a better job throughout the year of, you know, integrating into my decision-making. That would be my joy, like, you know, call it standing up for yourself or thinking about yourself, but that would be mine.
Self-advocacy. Annie is like smiling and giving you snaps, but self-advocacy, I think, is at the crux of why she does what she does. And what do I say all the time? When you love what you do, it shows. When you don't love what you do, it really, really shows. So the more that you love, respect, and appreciate what you're throwing out into the world, the better. And your friend, now I'm not trying to butcher his name, so it's Sarfraz Ahmed said, nice answer, Chris. Appreciate the shout out, and we appreciate you joining us today. So gold stars and wonderful joy for all that self-advocacy. Woohoo! Okay, Keith, you get to follow self-advocacy. What was your biggest joy this year?
Biggest joy was impact. You know, we talk about the discipline versus going with the flow and what happens, and be your own boss, because that makes you very successful. Accept everybody. You answer to everyone but yourself. And I started the year, you know, I've been consulting for a good 8-10 years. And so I am not the boss. I'm never the boss. For me, if anything, I come up with some good ideas and things that help. So I had to measure it in terms of other people's successes. And when you use the word impact, which is something that I didn't think about until somebody called and told me, that my December 1st business article, it's called The Boston and Maine Connection. I've been writing a business column for 10 years. And December was my 120th installment. And I started to scribble these categories together of, you know, what it covered. And the word community keeps coming up, strategy. I mean, it's almost a book, but we won't talk about that tonight. The other big piece of impact was to see on a couple of the projects that I've been involved in. You know, I came from content, I came from sales. And sales, you do need to know the right ways to do it. It's the consultative way. It's helping others. And I moved from sales and content to the thing everybody else is running away from, and that's the media, traditional news media. I've been a photojournalist, one of my many different hats. Why? Because the old school and the old way of looking at it is so far off base. where do you get your news? You get it from TikTok. You get it from Instagram. We don't get it from a paper that's printed and you're behind by a week or a month. And I took on a media project this year. We saw a 4-fold increase in an old print ink paper because we focused on community. Did the same thing in its exact counterpart opposite, 100% digital, no paper anywhere. And again, a 2 to 4-fold increase in daily, weekly, or monthly readership, depending on which of these programs I was in. And that's impact. It's they take the credit, not me. I'm happy for it, but the strategy that went into it was on building. And I listened to, Chris said it, Annie said it. Do I go more disciplined, or do I go with what? We've all said that in some way, shape, or form. And the answer is, if you're the leader, you do have to make a decision, but you also have to be able to change just as quickly if everything around you says it's not the right thing. Pivot, pivot, pivot till you get to the top.
And great answer. And my answer to that is, what do I do when I'm given all these opportunities? I say you go back to your mission and your motto, which is why we cover this in DEBcember. It's when you know who you are, what you do, what makes you unique, and how you help, that gets to be your decision tree when all these opportunities come your way. Is it an alignment? Yes, then yes. Is it an alignment? Does it? I don't know what that noise was, but if it's not a hell yes, a heck yes, whatever, maybe it. But what is it? There are two schools of thought. It's either a heck yes or a hell no, or it's, will it help you in another way? And that's another way to look at the opportunities. Okay, it's not going to be direct, but it's going to make me happy, and something that makes me happy is going to positively impact my business. So we're all pretty much saying the same thing. It's look to yourself and what is important to you and what joy, information, education you have to spread into the world, and make the decisions in your business path that are in alignment.
That's nice. We set that up for you so beautifully.
Thank you.
I was about to say, I was like, man, you really just pulled that common thread all the way through. I love it.
Yep. Well done.
But this is also why this is like the power panel to kick off the new year. I know that the four of us, we're very passionate about what we do. There's a reason we are in the business we are in, and we want to. It's not about us. It is about making the world a better place. And Chris, you've probably, everybody's had their ups and downs, but given how the event industry has been like exploding and imploding and exploding and imploding again, what is that? How do you just keep that smile on your face?
Yeah, well, Keith, you kind of hit it right on the nose, right? Pivot, pivot, pivot. So Deb, what you're talking about is absolutely relevant. I think it's the number one challenge that I had to face this year, like to be a little bit more specific. It's the changing of our core market, right? So we're a platform that primarily serves virtual events. We're also used for some other use cases like office space, team meetings, things like that. My WeWork lights are going off, but so we're also used for other use cases as well. With that being said, our number one core market had sort of a pendulum swing to it. So during we build and sell video chat products. During the pandemic, you can imagine that was an incredibly relevant business, right? So it's almost like the pendulum was pulled all the way to the right on that to say like, okay, we're going to be full virtual events. My inbox was exploding, right? It was like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. I had sales calls from people who said like, can you help me with an event in 2 days? Like, I'll just tell me where to send the check, right? So business was exploding for the last 2 years. Now, post-pandemic, there's almost been like an overcorrection, if you will, towards like the in-person events, right? And as we now enter a recession, people are sort of saying like, hey, okay, maybe we shouldn't have to spend like X $1,000s on catering, flight tickets, and hotels. So maybe we do need a virtual event. So we're starting to see that pendulum swing backwards, which is some of the things that we're preparing for 2023. But Deb, it's exactly like you said, this implosion, explosion, implosion, explosion. It's been a very interesting challenge for the last couple of months, especially. I think whether it's on the fundraising side and like calming investor worries, saying like, hey, summer volume went down because everywhere that we had like, these virus mandates and restrictions have been lifted. There's an overcorrection to saying like, oh yeah, look our sales numbers ticking back up. With that being said, though, I think like all this can be wrapped up with a quote I heard from a venture capitalist a while back in his book. He said, I think startups have the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, and everything is amplified by the lack of sleep. With that being said, though, right, everyone gets it. So with that being said, though, you have to sort of think of yourself like an F1 or like a race car driver. Yes, you're going at 100 miles an hour, and yes, there are walls along the side of the track that if you hit, your car will shatter into a million pieces, not to mention yourself. But what do race car drivers do? They're aware of the walls, they focus on the road. I think that's really what it comes back to, right? Just, I know the walls exist. I know, Annie, you were talking about like old Yellering the business. I was in a conference earlier this year and I was talking with a bunch of startup founders. Not a single startup founder I met said they hadn't considered it. One did, one out of like 150. But like, other than that, like majority sample size was, yeah, like this might be the year. With that being said, right, again, focus, know the walls exist, focus on the road ahead.
Love that. And it's such a great visual too. And even for me, so what I've been doing lately is, well, talking, obviously, but because my system for goal setting simplified, I discovered worked really well for events, figuring out, setting your goals for who you want to meet, what you need to learn before you go to events to turn the time and money you've spent into leads and potential business growth, which is great because the only thing I love as much as goals is events. So very hand in hand. But it's the end of the year and it's like, okay, it's goal season. So I get to be both me's, which is great, getting people set up for the new year. But events I felt have always been important. And I think one thing that the pandemic really highlighted is they're important for everyone. They're important when you don't have them and you have to recorrect. And when you do know that navigating them in this new world, all the bounty that can come from them. But if you don't know how to navigate them, why are you wasting your time? So I love that things are starting to rebound. And I think that's the perfect world of events is that hybrid where you're always going to have some people who want to do in person. But the accessibility of the virtual, I don't think is going to go away. So I think once people get tired of traveling, there'll be a nice little resurgence. I don't know, Annie, you still go to live events. What are you thinking?
I mean, I go to live events again, risking a tridemic now. Goodness gracious. Because that's how I use my extroversion for the year. I'm a very loud introvert and I need to meet people quickly and connect with them deeply. And now that I have the luxury of sharing space with people again, I think it's important for me to do that. I went to a really incredible small retreat that my business coach, Chris DeGrasso, put on, which was phenomenal. And I needed it desperately on multiple fronts. But I think that you're completely correct. I don't think hybrid is going anywhere. I don't think virtual is going anywhere. There are other times where, especially if I'm doing really tough work or creative work or emotional work, it's kind of nice to be able to eat your own food and pee in your own toilet. Like it's nice to be able to sleep in your own bed and pet your dog at the end of the day. Right. And also from a cost effective standpoint, it is not always cost effective for me to fly to Topeka. Right. I don't know why everything I'm doing this year is in Orlando. I wish there was an option that I could just say, can I just automatically hybrid all things of Orlando? No offense, Orlando, but I'm over you. If it weren't multifaceted, if me going wasn't multi-purpose, I would definitely choose a more hybrid role, right? And I think that's based on how we choose all marketing, right? Is this going to move one needle or is this going to move 15 small needles? And there's a time for both, right? There's a time for the one big leap that's going to shake you out of complacency, wake your list up, wake you up, whatever you got to do. The lack of sleep thing is very real and also terrifying when we talk about race car drivers because those guys get sleep. Okay? They're hurling themselves at those walls and focusing on the road, and they can do that because they have slept, unlike most of us, right? So if I'm going to put myself on a plane, it better be multi-purpose. That is a small micro leap. But if I'm going to write a novella which is a sales-spirational nonfiction, that is one big leap that's going to move something for me in that big way. It's just energy management of when you got to do the everyday risks and when you got to take the bigger leaps. And in startup, like Chris was saying, oh my gosh, yes, that pendulum is universal. We have a problem that is disruptive, then suddenly everybody's doing it, so it's saturated, and then it swings back into normal. And then most tenacious, creative, and willing to pivot survive, right? So going through that rhythm of feast and famine and making sure that you know that each and every time that pendulum swims back, you don't go so deep into famine because you've made better choices, better risks throughout, right? Because we're going to swing no matter what. There are people out there that don't like Oreos, okay? Like, we don't know why stuff happens. It just does.
So many wonderful things in there. But the thing that I'm going to zero in on, and then we're going to let Keith chime in on this as well, is the little wins are just as, if not more important than those big leaps and those huge wins, because those are what keeps you going. I'm doing 23 tips to start 2023 now. This is my series. So if you follow at the Deb Method, you can get almost daily inspiration throughout the month. But the first one is list your wins from 2022, because that's what's going to get you excited and motivated and saying, oh, I did all that. Well, no problem. I've got this. So in the list, little wins, big wins, any wins, they all count. Because again, we're still here. Yay. So Keith, thoughts?
Well,
on anything?
Annie saved the day for me when she said energy management, because I was about to shout out totally disagreeing about sleep and sleep balance, because everyone I work with who's passionate, nobody sleeps. Even if you sleep and you need a good full day the next day, if you're passionate about what you're doing, you're thinking of every what if. And it's so, no, it just doesn't happen. And going back to where this all fits for people who are leading businesses, and I used the word tipping point earlier, and tipping point is a real one, and events is a key piece to it. I really want to learn more later about what Chris is doing, because unlike Annie, I'm not going out to large events. You put more than 6 people in a room and you're going to see me on screen. And I conduct business that way. I'm doing interviews that way. I've won awards that way. I like this office, not that much. I'd like to be outside. But the reality is, to paraphrase what Annie said, I like the comfort of my kitchen, my bathroom, the choice of food that I'm using. And I save a heck of a lot of time burning rubber on the road or flying all over the place. So I love the hybrid. And I think that's such an important piece of it. It's back to the noise questions that are out there. With so much what's going on, how do I get it done? You make that decision. Do you stay? Do you go? Do you want to miss the most important in-person event? Absolutely not. So how do you deal with that? And that's kind of where the business that I've been in with the consulting piece has really grown tremendously, looking for tools like what Chris has to be able to conduct business that's as real as in-person can be. Annie and I were on a call together. Deb and I have talked frequently. Chris is brand new to me. Hi, Chris. But I'm comfortable enough to be on this screen that, I see the body language. I see the laughter, and those are the things that make a difference. And that's, to me, the passion is what drives you forward. And those wins, whether they're big or little, as you started to ask, I thought you were going to throw another question at me. I always like to listen rather than answer questions.
One thing I can toss in on that passion thing, I think, is definitely customer responses. And I was just thinking through, Deb, your question earlier about what keeps me going. Sure, focusing on the road is number one, but I think it all comes back to just getting that one feedback email in the midst of hey, my internet connection doesn't work. Can you help me? Or whatever nonsense you have to deal with in your customer feedback. But there'll always be that one email, or hopefully multiple emails, that say, hey, just wanted to let you know that for us, the event that we were able to host online was amazing. We didn't have the budget to hold it in person. We were going to cancel it. We decided to try a new software. It worked beautifully. We're going to keep going with it. Thank you for saving our event, right? Or whatever it might be. I think my favorite feedback form I ever got was, I'm going to name my son Gatherly, which like I need to like print out and like put on my wall somewhere, like one of my favorite quotes. But anyways, I mean, like in all seriousness though, I think it does come back to the customer, and Keith, what you were saying earlier about the impact, right? And or Annie, what you were saying about like creation and like seeing things like manifest in the real world, whether it comes as like a novella that you're writing, you know, customer interactions and customer feedback, it doesn't matter. That's like I think another thing that I can always like go back to and say like, okay, it's not about me, right? As much self-advocacy is there, it's not about me, it's about the impact that's being made. And if that impact is continuing and I have the opportunity to keep building it, amazing. Why wouldn't I keep doing it?
One thing that I've discovered, because we're on the little event tangent, well, I can make just about anything an event tangent, but when you're thinking about your business, it really is that mission. How can you help, inform, educate? When you're approaching events, it's the opposite. Is what do I need to get from this so I can bring it back to my business and inform, educate, entertain? So it's a mind shift. But when you go to these, and I'm like Keith, I love the virtual world, my office, you know, my food, my Instant Pot. But the fact that you can have an impact virtual as well as in person is amazing. It's like, you mean people used to travel all the time and spend all this time and energy? The fact that we can make these connections, and you are all three friends that I've met because the world opened up so much over the last 3 years. So we need to keep learning and doing and meeting so we can learn, do, and meet more.
I think on that note, I think most of the people that I've met over the last year and a half have been virtual. And I think I've been one of the most interesting things about the pandemic, all the disaster and unfortunateness aside, one of the silver linings benefits is I think a lot of people have learned how to make meaningful virtual connections, right? Whereas previously, before the pandemic, it was very like I would meet somebody in person and then we would develop a virtual connection when the time was right and it was comfortable. Now it's a flip, right? Like I develop a virtual connection, that virtual connection gets deep. Hey, by the way, I'm in Chicago, I'm in SF, London, whatever. Let's grab a drink, let's grab coffee, whichever you need more, right?
Yes,
it's so true, Chris. I had a guy show up on my deck and we had a drink on my back deck during the summer. We had only met and then continued conversations through online video calls. And he was passing through where I am and he called up and said, do you like wine? Do you want to get together? I'm going to be right. And it is. And that would never have happened any other way than that huge global digital reach.
Amazing. So now it's time to set some actual goals for the new year. Woohoo! And usually I start with the professional goals, but I feel like flipping it. So what a big personal goal do you have for 2023? And Annie, do you want to start?
My big, juicy personal goal is to get my salespirational, to use the Deb word again, novella into the hands of 1,000 coaches or coach identified service providers. I want 1,000 people to get it into their hands and to read it. In order to do that, I need to send it to more than 1,000 people. But that's my big, juicy goal. And I'm going to try not to plan how I get there. To go to the very, very beginning, I'm going to try to allow that 1,000 to unfold through dedicated, consistent, hard, weird work and not through over strategizing. That's my secondary goal. Don't over strategize how that 1,000 occurs.
I have to ask, this is a personal goal.
Yeah.
As opposed to a business goal.
Yeah.
This is plain.
So it's my personal goal because what I'm going to require of myself to grow the most is to thicken my skin, because I'm very precious about my writing. And so it is a personal goal and a business goal. My business goal is the same goal stripped down into a revenue goal. Okay. But my resilience is the goal. Right? And optimism is the goal, and proving to myself how I can weather trolls and bad feedback is the goal, because I want to be a more fortified me when we have our 4th DEBcember party.
Okay. That is fair. And I think this is the point where I'm going to invite all 3 of you back for Start 2024 now next year. So that's one of my goals for the New Year's, to have the 3 of you back so we can touch base. Okay, accepted personal goal, and then the professional element of it is, because you started on that path, Annie, so you might as well finish the thought. The professional goal part of it is
filling the Non-Sleazy Sales Academy. We'll just leave it at that. But again, not over strategizing the method.
Okay, that sounds good to me. And again, you can go to Sell Coach Sell and use the code DEBsentme to get your copy. So let's get you closer to that 1,000 from this show.
Magnificent, please and thank you.
Awesome. So Keith, personal goal for the new year?
Okay, personal goal. This is the tough one, because what I really, really want to do is carve out some cozy corner. This looks great, right? I've got the professional space. You don't want to see what's below the screen. That's the real turmoil that exists. And with all of that filing stuff, it takes time and energy to find the right pieces of paper, or the file cabinet over here with all of these things sitting and waiting for me. And if I can just have that space that keeps the organizational monster under control, so that I know when I'm working on project number 1 for this client, I just pull that out and it's all in one place. I mean, it usually is, but works in progress. I don't have a big wall. I don't have a giant architect's table to lay it all out on. So they tend to become verticals. That's why they call them stacks. And my stacks are here. And personal goal is to just have this point of calm where I could sit and write and do something with it.
Somebody get this man a glorious cabinet.
I was thinking we need to put like Google Docs or Notion or Microsoft Teams or something.
Spoken like a startup tech founder, Chris. Chris is like, we could solve this problem with that.
I won't tell you the one I use. It's an old line. They've been around for a long time. Don't want to disparage anything, but some of these cloud tools aren't fast enough to handle the passion. And by the time it sinks and comes back down, I'm in a bad mood.
Oh, that's a great answer. I love it.
Well, and Chris, something I know that they probably don't is that are you or are you not the tech founder that writes everything on actual paper? There you go.
Thank you.
I think I've said this before. My engineering team had this like thing where like every week or so they would send me like a new software to try and get my note taking out of my notebook. I have not done that yet, but this is for personal notes. Our team documents are all on Notion, free branding for them, but our team documents are all accessible. Personal documents, I have a slew of notebooks.
As do
Mine are
I.
color coded.
So your personal goal is your cozy space. Wonderful. Right. What is the professional goal?
The professional goal is to take on, and it came about because of 2 projects this year, plus 120 separate columns written. And so the professional goal is to take the passion to help others in those skills and to create workshops that'll make a difference, whether it's open to a particular group or a vertical, or it's inside of a project where I've been hired and we've seen the success because I've set the framework, or I've helped the founders or the leaders create that boundary that keeps them focused. And within that are are lessons learned that others can use. So I've thought of it in terms of workshops, a how-to, a quick checklist that you can work from, and boom, it flies.
Nice. Awesome. Okay, Chris, it's your turn. Personal goal first.
So it all leverages off of the theme word for next year. So as of right now, we're focusing on discipline, right? So the personal goal actually will come with huge support from my girlfriend, would be healthy eating, because it's when you're traveling and when you're working until like whatever o'clock at night, and you get home, it's like, oh, do I really have time to sit down and cook, right? Or if you're traveling, oh, I'm at this conference, like I'm in a hotel somewhere, I have to just go across the street and pick up whatever food, right? So I think healthy eating specifically will be my personal goal, really doubling down on that and making sure that, it's not just like, okay, what's on Uber Eats that I can get in the next 20 minutes before my next meeting. So that's the personal goal. On the professional side, right?
Can I just interrupt real quick?
Yeah,
I love whatever o'clock.
I realized just now when you brought it up, that's something I say pretty often. I don't think anybody else does, though.
They do now.
There we go.
Please go on. I just had to call that out because I love that so much.
No, I love it. So on the professional goal, it's very similar. Of course, it relates back to the word, right? So focusing on discipline again. With respect to discipline, I think my one team / startup goal would be alignment, right? And I don't want this to come at the cost of pivoting, but if you're pivoting, everyone still needs to be aligned in what the new target is. You can't have your entire team saying like, okay, I think this is the best objective, so I'm going to chase it. No, I think where the flexibility needs to come in is on how people achieve the goal. So what I view my job as with my company and any team that I lead is very much set the direction and make sure the adequate resources are there. How my team gets to the goal is a lot less important to me as long as they reach it, under budget, within the timeline, even better. But alignment, I would say, which falls under discipline, would be the professional goal.
Amazing. And I love that your personal goal is actually a personal
Yeah, it is a very personal goal.
No, I love this. Have we talked about the Instant Pot and how it is life-changing because you put in ingredients and it comes out meals?
This sounds like it could be a perfect solve for what I'm looking for.
Yes. I will send you, I wrote this article, I'll put it in the show notes as well. Instant Pot for productivity. I love it because you put it even soup, you put in and I love making veggie soup, but also chicken soup. You put everything in there and then you've got however long it takes to come to pressure and then another 15, 20 minutes for it to cook. And then when you're done, you've got this reward because you have food.
This is perfect. Oh man, this is why I like doing the show early because now I'm getting a head start on 2023. It's perfect.
This
testimonial for you. So Deb started me the easy way with doing eggs in the Instant Pot, and then you progress from there. So you have the small successes as you go.
This is amazing. There's a graded system with it.
There's also
are you actually using it, Keith?
A little.
There are a phenomenal amount of cookbooks that you can get from your local library that specifically make recipes for Instant Pot.
So there's a whole subculture with Instant Pots.
I live inches away from Little India here in Chicago, and it is the hallmark of things like these sauces that take days. I found a cookbook on how to hack them in an Instant Pot, and I have never felt more of a cultural appropriator, but it is delicious and nutritious.
Phenomenal.
It happens in about 25 minutes. So, yes, there is a whole subculture of Instant Pot for sure, because it's old Ron Popeil. You could set it and forget it. And also, most of them, not for nothing, double as slow cookers. So if you don't want your food right away, you could set it at the beginning of a meeting and come home to hot food.
Even better. Deb, I'm sure this is what you expected when you planned out the show, right? We were going to be talking about Instant Pots at the very end.
Well, believe it or not, I don't think, Annie, you and I, as frequently as we talk, I don't think we've ever gone down the Instant Pot rabbit hole.
I don't think that we have, and I think that's probably for the best, because I am also a high priestess of Instant Pots, and both of us have other things to discuss. So
definitely, we agree to agree.
No, but yes.
There's also a ton of Instant Pot Facebook groups, and I remember how do you not know this?
How far does this rabbit hole go? I mean, look, let's take a business lesson out of this. There can be a culture for anything that beautifully solves a problem. And if you solve a problem beautifully, people will tell their friends about it, even if they have to pay for it. And even if it winds up derailing something as wonderful as a Deb Show holiday party, right? It just happens. But people do not want to keep secrets when it comes to things that change their lives. If you are putting something out there that moves a needle for someone, you can expect them to tell friends, and isn't it better if you ask them to? So there's a business lesson
absolutely.
reined in on Instant Pot.
That's
Love
a great
it.
case study.
And I always expect to digress into food. It took a long time. Usually we digress
We
into
got
food
there.
much sooner.
We were
Into
very
the show.
disciplined tonight.
This has been absolutely amazing. Before we wrap, I would love for each of you to gift a goal to the audience. What is something that they can do to start 2023 now? Keith, what goal would you like to gift?
Sure. So what I'm going to gift is, since passion comes into this a lot, whether you believe in the pivots or the tipping points or not, the one goal I would give and gift to people is, when you've seen this recording or if you've watched live, take something you're passionate about and do something to, even if it's just writing out the first 3 steps of what you'll do with it or take it. If it's part of next year, start there. Start with a passion project of setting up something that you implement the first step today, which is writing out a goal or 3 goals to make it happen.
Take something you're passionate about and start making a plan. I love that. I love that step 1 is to make the plan. Amazing. Love it. And Chris, what goal are you gifting today?
Yeah, I came prepared because I've noticed a trend every time I'm on the show. It seems to always end the same way.
It's called consistency.
Discipline, consistency. Deb, you and I talk a lot about relationships when we do get our non-talk show chats. We talk about like relationships and how those are really important. And I got to experience a gift that I got with an old friend of mine had just called me out of the blue, which is a very welcome surprise. And I don't know if I'm dating myself younger by saying this, but I don't receive that many phone calls from non-work oriented things anymore. My phone calls are my immediate family, my roommates when like they need to take the trash out or whatever, and then like, you know, work, right? So receiving a call from an old friend that I usually just text or like Facebook message or whatever was a very, very welcome surprise. So flipping it over, call an old friend that you haven't caught up with in a while, catch up with them, share that joy of, you know, oh, finally, like something that isn't a telemarketer or work.
It is a pleasant surprise when the phone rings and it's like a person, because that almost never happens.
Right?
Actual person. I love that, because it's going to make someone else's day and it's going to make your day. So it's like triple win.
Exactly.
Fantastic. If Annie could stop laughing long enough.
My elder millennial butt just had this like sad Celine Dion moment the other day. I was like feeling so professionally lonely and I was having such a rough day. And the phone rang and I was like, oh, someone is calling me. And I answered the phone and it was like, this is a prescription notification from Walgreens. And I literally just sat at my desk and I was like, all by myself. I'm so sad. So yes, I love call a friend because then you both get to benefit, right? But my gifted goal for everybody is say what you mean to say. Because so many times my clients come to me with copy that they have self-censored or toned down. And high on the cusp of my novella where I say only exactly what I mean to say. There's so much noise out there, to use the word Keith started with, and to use another Keith word, wouldn't it be delightful just to say what you mean to say? So that's the goal I would like to give.
That's amazing. Oh, you guys, this is just, it's so wonderful and really a fantastic kickoff to the new year or the early new year or however you want to call it, what this is. Where can people find you? Annie, where can people find you?
You can find me at sellcoachsell.com and use the code Deb sent me.
Flawless.
Excellent. And Chris, where can people find you?
I respond to email best. Hit me at Chris, CHRIS, at gatherly.io. Gatherly, GATHERLY.io.
Amazing. And Keith, where can people find you?
They can find me at keithspiromedia.com, or email is fine too, keith@keithspiromedia.com.
And I am at the Deb Method everywhere, and you can go to thedebmethod.com/blog to get the recaps from this and the really other amazing conversations I've had year-round with some just delightfully awesome people. I can't believe the year's over and that we get a new one. Isn't it great how that works? One year ends, the next one begins. When you get that running start into it, even better. Before we wrap, what was I going to say? Before we wrap, do you have, because there's so many really amazing things you all have said throughout this conversation, do you have just one final thought that you want to leave people with to really get them in the spirit of DEBcember? Keith, what final thought would you like to wrap up with today?
Pick a word or pick 3 words that lead you into your new year. And it's much better than any kind of New Year's resolution, which always falls by the wayside. Shout out to Chris Brogan, who got me started on this 10 years ago and is a master at that. But absolutely, if you pick one word or some theme, you're going to win.
Awesome. And Annie, what final thought do you want to leave people with?
Self-advocacy. Whoop, whoop.
Amazing. And Chris, what is your final thought? It could be a word, it could be a phrase. Both have been done.
I was actually going to advocate for both of those two combined, but when you're setting your goals, make sure to set your goals and don't forget yourself. So I will be the bridge between the two recommendations, which I love.
Set your goals and don't forget yourself. Yes, because, well, first of all, we're here. Goal Chat Live, beginning of DEBcember. Any day, any week, any month is the opportunity to embrace change, set new goals, and make a plan to create the life that you want. So if you are watching or listening, gold star for you for choosing yourself to get like the best leap possible into the new year. Thank you, my friends, Chris Cherian, Annie P. Ruggles, and Keith Spiro for celebrating DEBcember with me. Whether you're watching or listening, we're glad that you chose us to spend time with today, and in doing so, you are choosing yourself and your goals. Go on out there and go for it. We know you can do it, and just a happy DEBcember.
Thanks so much for having us.
Everyone.